The neuroprobe felt like liquid fire threading through Marcus Chen's skull. He gritted his teeth against the alien restraints, watching the Corvani interrogator's 6 eyes glow with satisfaction as the device burrowed deeper into his consciousness. The crystalline chamber around him pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, each flash synchronized with heartbeat. "Your species intrigues us, human," the interrogator hissed through its translator implant. Its voice carried a metallic undertone common to all Corvani, a sound like wind chimes made of razors. Such primitive biology, yet you managed to spread across 17 star systems before we found you. Marcus forced his breathing to remain steady. 3 months of captivity aboard the Corvani flagship had taught him to mask his thoughts during these sessions. The key was to think about mundane things, his grandmother's recipe for apple pie, the feeling of Earth's rain on his face, anything but the coordinates burned into his memory. "We know you're hiding something," the interrogator continued, adjusting the probe's intensity. "Your neural patterns spike whenever we mention your home world. Tell us where Earth is located, and your death will be swift." Pain exploded behind Marcus's eyes, but he managed a bitter laugh. "You think I'm the first human you've caught? Others have told you nothing for good reason." The interrogator's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Actually, Dr. Chun, you are first. Your species has been elusive, but our harvest fleets are patient, and your colonies are not as hidden as you believe." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For 3 months, he'd endured torture believing that other humans had been captured, that his suffering was part of a larger pattern. The realization that he was alone, that Earth's location died with him, made his chest constrict with panic. "Ah, there it is," the interrogator purred, watching Marcus's vital signs spike on the biomonitors. "The fear response. Your species' emotional volatility is fascinating. We've studied your abandoned research stations. You know, your xenobiology work on Kepler. For 38B was particularly enlightening." Marcus's blood ran cold. Kepler. For 38B was where he'd made his greatest discovery and his greatest mistake. The Corvani must have found his research on their own biology, the weaknesses he'd identified in their genetic structure. If they knew what he'd learned about their reproduction cycles, about the fatal flaw in their crystalline symbiosis. "I see you understand the implications," the interrogator said, its voice dropping to a whisper. "Your research could have been used as a weapon against us, but instead, it will help us understand ourselves better. And once we extracted everything from your mind, we'll use your knowledge to find Earth and harvest your entire species." The neural probe pushed deeper, and Marcus felt his mental defenses crumbling. Images flashed through his mind. Earth's blue oceans, the hidden colony ships, the secret relay stations that masked humanity's true expansion. He was going to break. The probe would tear every secret from his consciousness, and humanity would burn. But then he remembered something else from his research, something the interrogator had missed. The Corvani weren't just studying human biology. They were dependent on it. Their crystalline symbiosis was failing, had been failing for generations. That's why they harvested biological material from other species, why they needed constant genetic input to maintain their empire. And Marcus knew exactly how to exploit that weakness. He stopped fighting the probe and instead began to guide it, feeding the interrogator carefully selected memories. Images of Earth defenses, but not its location. Details of human physiology, but not the crucial differences between colonial and terrestrial humans. Most importantly, he shared his research on Corvani biology, but only the parts that would help them, not the parts that would destroy them. The interrogator's excitement was palpable as it absorbed the information. "Excellent. Your cooperation will be remembered when we write the history of your species' extinction." Marcus smiled through the pain. The interrogator had no idea what he'd just done. By sharing his knowledge willingly, he'd established a neural link that worked both ways. While the probe extracted information from his mind, he was learning about the Corvani network, their communication systems, their command structure, and most importantly, he was learning about the growing rebellion within their own ranks. Corvani who questioned the Empire's endless expansion, who sought a different path forward. The interrogator's own memories revealed secret meetings, whispered conversations, a network of dissidents who believed their species' survival lay not in conquest, but in cooperation. The probe retracted with a wet sound, and Marcus slumped forward in his restraints. The interrogator studied the extracted data, its mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Your knowledge will serve us well. Human, but you're no longer needed. As the guards moved to escort him to the execution chamber, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The neural link was still active, still feeding him information about the ship systems, about the rebellion, about the Empire's true weaknesses. He wasn't going to die today. He was going to escape. And when he did, he wouldn't just be taking his freedom. He'd be taking the future of both species with him. The execution chamber's walls were covered in the same crystalline growth that powered Corvani technology. But Marcus could see something the guards couldn't. Microscopic fractures in the matrix, signs of the genetic degradation he'd identified in his research. The Empire's living ships were dying, just as he predicted. Any final words, human? The executioner asked, raising its plasma blade. The weapon hummed with lethal energy, its crystalline core pulsing in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Marcus looked up at the alien towering over him, its 6 eyes glowing with cold satisfaction. Just one question. How long since your last successful reproduction cycle? The executioner's blade wavered slightly. It was a young Corvani, barely past its first molting, but even would know the answer to that question. The Empire hadn't produced a new generation in over 200 years. Silence! The executioner snarled, but Marcus caught the flicker of uncertainty in its bioluminescent patterns. The crystalline symbiosis is failing, Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the restraints cutting into his wrists. Your people are dying, and you know it. That's why you harvest biological material from other species. You're trying to repair something that can't be fixed. The neural link he'd established during the interrogation was still active, feeding him information about the ship systems. He could sense the locations of the guards, the ship's weapon systems, even a complex network of tunnels that ran through the vessel's organic hull. But most importantly, he could sense the rebellion. Commander Vexcala was 3 levels below, meeting with other dissidents in the ship's gene labs. The neural link carried fragments of their conversation. Desperate plans, whisper hopes, the growing conviction that their empire's path led only to extinction. You know nothing about our biology, the executioner said, but its voice lacked conviction. Marcus smiled. I know more than you think. I know that every Corvani in this ship is slowly dying, their crystalline matrix breaking down at the cellular level. I know that your harvest fleets are becoming increasingly desperate, taking greater risks to find new genetic material. And I know that some of your people are already planning to change course. The executioner's blade trembled with rage. Impossible. The Empire is eternal. Our crystalline bonds are unbreakable. Tell that to Commander Vexcala. The effect was immediate. The executioner's bioluminescent patterns flared with shock, and Marcus felt the neural link surge with panic as the alien's thoughts became an open book. The rebellion was real, and it was more widespread than anyone had imagined. In that moment of distraction, Marcus acted. The neural link had shown him the ship's security systems, including the weakness in his restraints. He flexed his wrists at precisely the right angle, and the crystalline bonds shattered with a sound like breaking glass. The executioner spun toward him, plasma blade raised, but Marcus was already moving. 3 months of captivity had weakened his body, but his mind was sharp, enhanced by the neural link that still connected him to the ship's systems. He could sense the weapon's trajectory before it moved, could anticipate the guard's reactions. He rolled left as the blade scorched the air where his head had been, came up beside the executioner, and drove his elbow into the alien's primary respiratory organ. The Corvani doubled over, gasping, and Marcus seized a plasma blade. The weapon felt alien in his hands, its crystalline grip pulsing with organic warmth. But the neural link guided his movements, showing him how to activate the blade systems, how to adjust its intensity. The chamber doors burst open as guards rushed in, their own weapons raised. Marcus counted 8 of them, all heavily armed, all trained killers. Under normal circumstances, he would have died in seconds. But these weren't normal circumstances. The neural link had given him access to the ship's defensive systems, and he used that access now. The chamber's crystalline walls suddenly flared with blinding light, their bioluminescent patterns shifting to frequencies that caused severe disorientation in Corvani physiology. The guards stumbled, their weapons firing wild shots that scorched the walls. Marcus moved through them like a ghost, the plasma blade cutting through their armor with surgical precision. He didn't kill. He couldn't afford to create martyrs, but he disabled them efficiently, targeting nerve clusters and weapon systems. Within minutes, the chamber was silent except for the soft groans of wounded aliens. Marcus stood among them, the plasma blade still humming in his hand, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd just done. He'd escaped execution, but that was just the beginning. The neural link was showing him something extraordinary. The rebellion wasn't just a few disaffected commanders. It was a network that spanned an entire fleet, including ships throughout the Empire. Corvani who recognized that their species' survival depended on changing course. But the rebellion lacked leadership, lacked a unifying vision. They knew what they were fighting against, but not what they were fighting for. Marcus looked at the plasma blade in his hand, at the unconscious guards around him, at the crystalline walls that pulsed with dying light. He thought about Earth, about the human colonies scattered across the galaxy, about the two species that seemed destined to destroy each other, unless someone found a third option. He activated the chamber's communication system, using the neural link to bypass the security protocols. When the connection established, he spoke in the Corvani language, his accent rough but understandable. "Commander Vexkala, this is Dr. Marcus Chun. I think we need to talk." The response came immediately, carried through the ship's neural network with the speed of thought. "Human, you have just killed 8 of our people. Why should we listen to you?" Marcus looked at the guards, all of whom were breathing normally, their wounds superficial. "I haven't killed anyone, but I could have. The question is, do you want to know why I chose not to?" There was a long pause. Then, Deck 7, Section 12. "Come alone." Marcus smiled grimly. He was about to walk into the heart of an alien rebellion, armed with nothing but a stolen weapon and knowledge that could either save or damn both species. But for the first time in months, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The corridors of the Corvani ship pulsed with organic life, their walls shifting between translucent and opaque as Marcus made his way to Deck 7. The neural link guided him through the maze of passages, but he could feel the ship's awareness pressing against his mind like a living thing. Every step triggered bioluminescent responses in the walls, creating a trail of light that followed his progress. He passed maintenance alcoves where worker drones tended to the ship's biological systems, their movements precise and ritualistic. None of them looked at him directly, but he could sense their confusion through the neural link. A human walking freely through their ship was beyond their comprehension. The plasma blade at his side had gone dormant, but Marcus kept his hand near it. The neural link showed him the positions of security forces throughout the ship, and he knew that dozens of armed Corvani were tracking his movement. They weren't attacking, yet, but he could feel their tension building like static electricity before a storm. Section 12 was in the ship's lower levels, where the air was thick with the chemical signatures of the gene labs. The walls here were more obviously organic, their surfaces covered in specialized organs that processed genetic material from harvested species. Marcus recognized samples from at least 30 different worlds, all of them being analyzed, cataloged, and integrated into the Corvani biological matrix. It was a treasure trove of xenobiology, and it was also a monument to genocide. Commander Vexkala waited for him in a circular chamber lined with data storage nodes. The alien was smaller than Marcus had expected, its carapace marked with the scars of old battles. Unlike the interrogator, Vexkala's bioluminescent patterns were muted, almost subdued. "You came," the commander said, its voice carrying genuine surprise. "Most humans would have tried to reach the escape pods." "Most humans haven't spent 3 months learning about your people," Marcus replied. He could sense other Corvani in the adjacent chambers, the rebellion's inner circle, waiting to see if this unprecedented meeting would end in violence or revelation. Vexkala's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was thoughtful consideration. "The neural link. We detected the anomaly during your interrogation. Fascinating that your species could adapt to our technology so quickly." "Not adapt," Marcus corrected. "Exploit. Your interrogation probe works both ways if you know how to guide it." I've been learning about your people for months. Commander, I know about the genetic degradation, about the failed reproduction cycles, about the growing doubt within your ranks. The commander's carapace shifted color, patterns of deep blue and silver rippling across its surface. You speak of things that could be considered treason. I speak of things that could save both our species. Marcus stepped closer, noting how the other Corvani in the adjacent chambers tensed. Your empire is dying, Commander, not from external threats, but from internal collapse. The crystalline symbiosis that made your people powerful is now killing them. And you believe you can help us? Vex Scala's voice carried a note of skepticism, but also hope. Marcus activated a holographic display using the chamber systems, the neural link making the interface as natural as breathing. The display showed a complex molecular structure, the Corvani genetic matrix, but with modifications that made Vex Scala's eyes widen in shock. This is what I discovered on Kepler. 438b, Marcus said, the flaw in your crystalline symbiosis isn't random. It's systematic. Your ancestors designed it as a failsafe, a way to prevent your species from becoming too dependent on the technology. Impossible, Vex Scala breathed. The symbiosis is natural, evolved over millions of years. No, Marcus said firmly. It's artificial, created by an earlier generation of Corvani, who feared what their descendants might become. They built in a genetic timer, a gradual degradation that would force future generations to choose between evolution and extinction. The implications hit the commander like a physical blow. Marcus could sense the alien's thoughts through the neural link. Shock, denial, and then slowly understanding. The endless harvest campaigns, the desperate search for new genetic material, the growing sterility of their population. It was all connected. You're saying our own ancestors sabotaged us. I'm saying they gave you a choice, Marcus replied. The degradation can be reversed, but only if you're willing to abandon the Empire's current path. The genetic timer was designed to force cooperation, not conquest. Your people were meant to work with other species, not harvest them. Vex Scala was silent for a long moment, its bioluminescent patterns shifting through complex configurations. Finally, it spoke. Even if what you say is true, the Empire's leadership will never accept it. They would rather see our species extinct than admit weakness. Then we don't tell them, Marcus said. We show them. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. Surprise, then growing excitement. You're proposing a coup. I'm proposing an evolution. Marcus gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the ship's command structure. Your rebellion already has supporters throughout the fleet. What it lacks is a clear vision of what comes next. I can provide that vision. And what would you ask in return? Marcus smiled grimly. Nothing you're not already prepared to give. An end to the harvest campaigns. A chance for both our species to survive and thrive. And maybe eventually a future where humans and Corvani can explore the galaxy together instead of fighting over its remains. The neural link carried whispers of conversation from the adjacent chambers. The rebellion's leadership was debating, their thoughts a mixture of hope and fear. They'd waited generations for a solution to their people's decline, and now a human prisoner was offering them exactly that. But accepting his help would mean abandoning everything their empire had built, everything they believed about their own superiority. There would be resistance, Vex Scala said finally. The harvest fleets, the military command, the bioengineers who spent centuries perfecting the current system. They won't give up power easily. Then we'll have to take it from them, Marcus replied. But not through violence, through necessity. Show them that cooperation is the only path to survival, and even the most stubborn commanders will fall in line. Vex Scala's carapace rippled with complex patterns. Hope, fear, determination. You're asking us to bet our entire species on your theory. You're already betting your entire species, Marcus pointed out. The current path leads to extinction within 3 generations. At least this way you have a chance. The commander stood silent for a long moment, then activated its communication implant. Bring the others, it said. It's time to decide our future. As the rebellion's leadership filed into the chamber, Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Two species balanced on the edge of extinction, their fate resting on decisions made in a stolen moment aboard an alien ship. But for the first time since his capture, he felt genuinely hopeful. The neural link showed him the minds of the assembled Corvani, their fear and doubt gradually giving way to something more powerful, the possibility of a future worth fighting for. The rebellion's war room occupied the ship's secondary brain, a massive organ that served as backup to the main neural network. Marcus stood before a gathering of 12 Corvani commanders, their bioluminescent patterns creating a kaleidoscope of shifting colors in the chamber's dim light. Each one represented a different faction within the Empire: Harvest Fleet commanders, bioengineers, colony administrators, even a few members of the ruling council. "The human's proposal is madness," declared Commander Zexmorai, his scarred carapace bearing the marks of countless battles. "We should execute him and continue our current operations." "Our current operations are killing us," countered Chief Bioengineer Velsarna, her specialized limbs twitching with agitation. "The genetic degradation has accelerated beyond our ability to compensate. We have perhaps 50 years before complete reproductive failure." Marcus watched the debate through the neural link, feeling the currents of fear and desperation that drove both sides. The traditionalists clung to the Empire's militaristic approach because it was all they knew. The progressives wanted change but lacked a clear path forward. "May I demonstrate something?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through the argument. The room fell silent. Vex Kala gestured for him to continue. Marcus approached the chamber's central biocomputer, a writhing mass of neural tissue that processed vast amounts of genetic data. The neural link had given him unprecedented access to Corvani technology, and he used that access now to call up a holographic display that made several commanders in shock. The display showed the flagship's own genetic matrix, not the official version stored in the ship's databases, but the real-time biological scan that Marcus had compiled to the neural link. The degradation was far worse than anyone had admitted, with critical systems showing failure rates above 60%. "This ship is dying," Marcus said bluntly. "Your crystalline symbiosis is breaking down at the cellular level. Within 10 years, your flagship will be a tomb." "Impossible," Zexmorai snarled. "Our bioengineers monitor every system. We would have detected such degradation." "Your bioengineers see what they expect to see," Marcus replied. "The degradation is subtle, built into the genetic structure itself. But I can show you something else, a solution." He modified the display, showing the same genetic matrix but with strategic modifications. The neural link guided his movements, drawing on both his xenobiology expertise and the vast database of Corvani genetic research he'd absorbed during his captivity. "The key is cooperative symbiosis," he explained. "Your ancestors didn't just build a failsafe into your genetics. They built in a requirement for genetic diversity. The crystalline matrix was designed to work with multiple species, not just your own." Velsarna's specialized limbs extended toward the display, her bioluminescent patterns flaring with excitement. "The integration points, they're not random. They're designed to interface with foreign genetic material." "Exactly. But not through harvesting and forced integration. Through willing cooperation. The genetic timer your ancestors built will only reset if you form true symbiotic relationships with other species." The room erupted in argument. Some commanders dismissed the idea as impossible. Others saw it as a sign of weakness. But Marcus could sense the undercurrent of hope flowing through the neural link, the desperate desire for a future that didn't involve endless war. "Even if this is true," Zexmorai said, "implementing such changes would require the cooperation of the entire Empire. The ruling council would never approve it." "Then we don't ask for their approval," Vex Kala said quietly. "We demonstrate its effectiveness first." Marcus nodded. "I'm proposing a test. This ship has genetic samples from dozens of species. We can begin the integration process here, prove that cooperative symbiosis works." "And if it fails?" asked another commander. "Then you're no worse off than you are now," Marcus replied. "But if it succeeds, you'll have proof that can convince even the most skeptical council members." The debate continued for hours, but Marcus could sense the tide turning. The neural link showed him the private thoughts of the assembled commanders, their fear of extinction outweighing their fear of change. One by one, They began to accept that his proposal might be their only hope. Finally, Vex Kala called for a vote. The decision was close, 7 in favor, 5 against, but it was enough. "We proceed with the test," the commander announced. "But understand the risks. If we're discovered before we can prove the process works, we'll all be executed as traitors. And if we succeed," Marcus asked, "then we'll have convinced the rest of the Empire to abandon everything they believe for 1,000 years." Vex Kala's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep purple, the color of grim determination. Either way, there's no going back. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The rebellion's bioengineers worked frantically to prepare the integration chambers, while Marcus guided them through the complex process of genetic modification. The neural link made him an integral part of the ship's systems, his human intuition complementing their technical expertise. But as they worked, Marcus became aware of something else, a growing disturbance in the ship's neural network. The flagship's main brain was processing vast amounts of communication data, its patterns suggesting incoming transmissions from throughout the Empire. "Commander," he said, pulling Vex Kala aside, "something's happening. The ship's receiving priority communications from multiple harvest fleets." Vex Kala's mandibles clicked with concern. "What kind of communications?" Marcus closed his eyes, letting the neural link guide him deeper into the ship's systems. The information he found made his blood run cold. "They've found Earth," he said quietly. "The harvest fleets have located the human homeworld." The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every Corvani present understood the implications. The total annihilation of humanity, the loss of the most promising genetic material they'd ever discovered. "How long?" Vex Kala asked. Marcus consulted the neural link, his mind racing through star charts and fleet deployment data. 48 hours. Maybe less. The commander's carapace rippled with complex patterns. Shock, fear, and then sudden resolve. "Then we have 48 hours to prove that cooperation is possible. If we fail, both our species die." Marcus nodded grimly. The test he proposed was no longer just about saving the Corvani Empire. It was about saving humanity itself. And the only way to do it was to complete the most dangerous experiment in galactic history. As the bioengineers began the integration process, Marcus felt the weight of 2 civilizations resting on his shoulders. Through the neural link, he could sense the flagships approaching Earth, its weapons charging for the final harvest. Time was running out, but for the first time since his capture, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, at the center of a revolution that would either save both species or destroy them all. The integration chamber thrummed with otherworldly energy as Marcus lay connected to the ship's neural network through a dozen biomechanical conduits. The process was more intense than anything he'd experienced, his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his human mind to encompass the vast complexity of Corvani civilization. Through the neural link, he could feel the flagship's approach to Earth's solar system. The harvest fleet was massive, 300 ships carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with anticipation. But Marcus could also sense something else: doubt. The neural network carried whispers of the rebellion's activities, and those whispers were spreading throughout the fleet. Word of the human prisoners' claims, of the genetic degradation, of the possibility of cooperation instead of conquest. "Integration at 60%, Velsarna reported, her specialized limbs monitoring the complex biological processes. "The human's genetic matrix is adapting to our crystalline symbiosis faster than any species we've encountered." Marcus felt the changes happening at the cellular level, his DNA restructuring itself, forming new connections with the Corvani biotechnology. But this wasn't the forced integration of a harvested specimen. This was willing cooperation, and the difference was profound. "The degradation is reversing," breathed another bioengineer. "Look at the crystalline matrix. It's actually healing itself." Through the neural link, Marcus could feel the ship's systems responding to the integration. Damaged components were repairing themselves. Failing organs were regenerating, and the flagship's bioluminescent patterns were growing brighter and more complex. "It's working," Vex Kala said, its voice filled with wonder. "The cooperative symbiosis is actually working. But their celebration was cut short by an urgent communication from the fleet's command ship. The main display activated, showing the imposing figure of Supreme Admiral Kexworth, the Empire's military leader. All vessels, prepare for planetary harvest, the Admiral commanded. The human homeworld has been located. We will demonstrate the price of hiding from the Corvani Empire. Marcus felt a surge of desperate urgency. The integration was working, but it wasn't complete. He needed more time to prove that cooperation was possible, to show the Empire that there was another way, through the neural link. He reached out to the fleet's communication network, his consciousness spreading across the quantum channels that connected the harvest ships. What he found there was chaos. Hundreds of commanders debating the wisdom of the attack, ship brains processing conflicting data, and growing reports of the miraculous changes happening aboard the flagship. Admiral, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the fleet's communication network. I request permission to address the fleet. The request was so unprecedented that it froze the entire command structure. A human prisoner, supposedly dead, speaking directly to the Empire's leadership through their own neural network. Impossible, Kexworth snarled. The human was executed hours ago. The human stands before you now, Marcus replied, his consciousness fully integrated into the ship's systems. And I bring proof that your Empire doesn't have to die. The flagship's main display activated, showing the results of the integration experiment. The assembled commanders throughout the fleet watched in stunned silence as Marcus demonstrated the healing of the crystalline matrix, the reversal of genetic degradation, the restoration of biological systems that had been failing for generations. This is what happens when species cooperate instead of conquering, Marcus said. Your ancestors built the capacity for symbiosis into your genetics because they knew that diversity, not domination, was the key to survival. The neural link carried the reactions from throughout the fleet, shock, disbelief, and slowly growing hope. But it also carried something else, the rage of leaders who saw their authority being challenged. Lies! Kexworth roared. The human has infected our systems with some kind of virus. All ships, maintain formation, and prepare for harvest. But the fleet's response was hesitant. Too many commanders had seen the evidence, felt the changes happening in their own biosystems as the news of the integration spread through the neural network. I offer you a choice, Marcus continued. Attack Earth and gain nothing but dead worlds and empty resources, or work with humanity to heal your people and build a future that benefits both species. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Empire's history. Hundreds of commanders argued across the neural network, their voices creating a cacophony of bioluminescent patterns that lit up the space around the fleet. Some demanded immediate attack, convinced that showing weakness would destroy the Empire's credibility. Others urged caution, wanting to study the integration results before making a decision. Still others saw the offer of cooperation as the answer to generations of decline. But the decision ultimately rested with Supreme Admiral Kexworth, and Marcus could sense the alien's fury growing with each passing moment. Enough, the Admiral commanded. The harvest proceeds as planned. Any ship that refuses to participate will be destroyed as a traitor to the Empire. The threat was real. Marcus could sense the Admiral's flagship powering its weapons, preparing to fire on any vessel that disobeyed orders. But he could also sense something else through the neural link, a growing network of ships whose commanders were no longer willing to follow the old path. Then I invoked the right of genetic succession, Vex Kala said suddenly. The word sent shockwaves through the fleet. The right of genetic succession was an ancient law, and used for centuries, that allowed any member of the Empire to challenge the leadership's authority if they could prove that the current course would lead to genetic extinction. Impossible, Kexworth sputtered. You have no standing to invoke such a right. I have the proof, Vex Kala replied, uploading the integration data to the entire fleet. The human's genetic matrix has reversed the degradation in our crystalline symbiosis. This is evidence that cooperation, not conquest, is a path to survival. The neural network erupted with discussion as every bioengineer in the fleet analyzed the data. The results were undeniable. The integration had worked, and it offered hope for the Empire's future. The right of genetic succession is valid, declared Chief Bioengineer Velsarna, her authority carrying weight throughout the fleet. The evidence clearly shows that our current path leads to extinction. One by one, ships throughout the fleet began to acknowledge the challenge. The process was slow, contentious, and sometimes violent as traditionalist commanders fought to maintain the old ways. But the tide was turning. When the final vote was tallied, the result was clear. The Empire had chosen cooperation over conquest, evolution over extinction. Supreme Admiral Kexvorth's flagship fled the system, carrying those commanders who refused to accept the new reality. But the majority of the fleet remained, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with new patterns of hope and determination. Dr. Marcus Chun, Vex Kala said formally, "On behalf of the Corvani Empire, I extend an offer of alliance to humanity. Will you help us contact your people?" Marcus smiled, feeling the neural link carry his emotions throughout the fleet. "I thought you'd never ask." As the Harvest fleet transformed into a diplomatic mission, Marcus felt the weight of history settling around him. He'd entered alien captivity as a prisoner, but he was leaving as the architect of a new future, one where two species could explore the galaxy together, their combined strengths greater than some of their individual capabilities. The stars awaited, and for the first time in generations, both humans and Corvani could face them with hope instead of fear. Through the neural link, Marcus could sense the changes already beginning, not just in the crystalline matrix, but in the very soul of the Empire. The age of conquest was ending, and the age of cooperation had begun. And at the center of it all, the unlikely alliance between a human xenobiologist and an alien rebellion that had dared to dream of something better than endless war. The future was bright, and it belonged to all of them.